today. So let's. What I'm going to start. I'm going to talk about the overall economic outlook, our long-term fiscal outlook, and our general fund outlook. And I will say that as this is more compressed than we've done in past years, so there's not like a debt component and all that. We can have those discussions at other times, but given the time compression. So first of all, with the economic outlook, let's go to the fourth page, which says county labor force. And I want to say one thing about the economic outlook, which you guys are probably aware, which is whatever degree of uncertainty there is normally, just add a significant level to that. There is always we have uncertainty, but this year it's not just the economy, but the continued bouncing back and how that's affecting from COVID world. It's just going to have lots and lots of impacts throughout this. And one of the first things that we'll talk about that is our labor force situation. Now, one of the things, if you look at this, we have our labor force fell about 34,000 during the pandemic and has not rebounded. We have significantly. There's discussion about how many people died, how many people left the workforce, how many people chose not to work anymore, but whatever. This is true, and it's true statewide. It is much more true for Maryland than it is nationally. And one of the things that, so that's just a background item that's important and limits. As long as we have less people working, that's less taxes. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. So turn it over to the next slide. Unemployment rate, county versus state. Actually, we're pretty much where the state is. We've, before COVID and during COVID, we tended to be, before COVID, we tended to be in the middle, and then we tended to be a little higher. But now we're actually just about exactly where the state is. We're a couple tenths different. And when we talk about that, one of the things that's significant is we have a lot more jobs in Maryland than we have workforce participants. Nationally, there's about 1.2 jobs for every person looking for work. In Maryland, there's 3.1. I don't have a breakdown for Prince George's County, but Maryland has basically there are 3 jobs for every person who's looking for work on Maryland. Now, there may be that there are kinds of jobs that there's not enough people and so forth. So anyway, we're at 2% unemployment. If you look at, go to the next page, page 6, we've grown a little bit, but we are still 14,000 jobs below where we were before the pandemic. Of course, all our data is, 3/4 behind because that's just how long it takes to process it. And we're still, of those 14,000 jobs that we're down, about 5,000 are in the hospitality area. But what growth, we're growing, our job growth is growing slowly. It's kind of, we are seeing, leisure and hospitality, and we're seeing state jobs and federal jobs, but it's very slow. But the problem, the reason I think we have less jobs is not the creation of jobs, it's the available workers. So the next slide, page 7, you see CPI we're not quite back to normal, but we're back a lot. We peaked at 9% inflation, and we're down to 3%. Core inflation's is at 4, but it's trending downward. So I think we're in a good position with inflation. I will say there are several things that can worry us a bit about inflation. One of them is the business with the Houthis in the Red Sea. I know that sounds a little far away, but 10% of all the goods in the world flow through that location. And if instead of going a couple thousand miles, it goes around the entire continent of Africa, that just can disrupt change. So we'll see what happens. But barring that issue, we seem to be in a good place in regard to inflation. County wage growth. Wage growth has been good, and the interesting thing is, it's broadly it's almost Goldilocks, because it was a really good, large wage growth at the peak of inflation. Then that wage growth is still occurring, but it's now pretty slow. But wage growth has been better at the bottom, which is not something that's happened in recent. And so that's not bad. So that's the situation with that. Page 9 is housing trends. This is really important in terms of our revenue, but also in terms of our community. If you look at the dotted line is the sale price, and the bar line is the sales volume. So what you'll see is that the price of housing has continued to grow. It's moderating a bit, but the interesting thing about Prince George's County is we have not had the big run down that people had, and they're not had the big run up. So we continue to have healthy growth, and if you go back, if you go back 10 years, we've gone from about an average household price of about $250,000 to about $427,000. So we've got good growth. Of course, that creates problems in terms of how much people can afford in terms of housing, but we're not seeing the spikes that some of the other counties are. What I will also say, though, is you look at that sales bar. That's a combination of two things. One is what happened with interest rates, and of course sale prices. But interest rates is the big issue. But the other piece is just the availability of houses. So that's why transfer and recordation taxes have gone down so dramatically. We had we dropped in 2022. We were at about $230 million, and we dropped to about 170. We're recovering somewhat from that, but there's just not the availability. Next slide. Next slide is 10, and that's just a change in statewide assessments. This is good news, except again, it's that we're limited by the homestead tax credit. If you go back all the way back to 2016, you can see that there's almost, I don't think there's any year where our, whatever group that's being reassessed didn't grow by double digits. And that double digit, but of course, and that's double digits over 3 years. So if you get a 15% increase, it's not like you get 15% in 1 year, it's 5% a year. However, we're not getting that because we're limited by the homestead tax limitation. State limit is 10%. Our limit is inflation, or 5%, whichever is lowest. We had 1 year where we did we went up to 5%. Otherwise, it's below. This coming year, it's 3%. So but that does say that our valuations. Okay, sorry. It does say that our valuations are doing okay. Okay, next on slide 11 is just that we're now going to start talking about the fiscal outlook. I'm going to go to slide 12. Now here's where this is the latest number. I think we've went out last week, the Spending Affordability Committee's report, so you all have that. But compared to the October number, it's a little better at the front end, a little worse at the back end. But okay, what this is not saying what we're going to do. This is saying if we just keep doing everything the way we're doing now, if we don't, we still have the same rate of salary increases, we don't change any tax rates, we plug in what we know from the Kerwin, all that stuff, this is what would happen. We would have a $171 million gap in 25, and that gap gets much bigger in 26 and then just sort of grows naturally after that. I do want to say we are not submitting a budget that has a $171 million gap. That's because we will make adjustments. Okay, fiscal challenges. This is page 13. Assuming no use of fund balance, and this is basically I'm telling you what we were just looking at. This is assuming what we just talked about. We have a revenue range growth that we're projecting will be from between 3.5 and 4.3%, which is we're returning to the way we were before COVID world sent everything either bigger or smaller. Expenditure growth, again, is 3.9 to 6.6%. The Maryland the blueprint, debt service, pensions, COLAs and merits, which have been negotiated that are going into effect now, and assumes that we would fall back to the prior level, pre-COVID average. It assumes that we continue to do additional classes in public safety, and that it assumes that our annual debt service, our new debt, it grows at the projected rates that we had before. Now, I do want to, the fiscal challenges that we're looking at, as we all try to deal with the budget this coming year, the demands for funding in the related to the Board of Education and Kerwin and the blueprint, the wage adjustments, pensions that we talked about. Debt service issues will continue to increase, and one of the pressures that we are facing, as most of you know, during COVID, the cost of construction went up significantly across the board. Now, good news is it's coming down. I mean, it's not coming down to where it was, but it's not going up like it was. It's basically now we've flattened out, but it's flattened out at a much higher level. So we're going to have to make some tough choices about what capital we do. We are in the middle. We have started negotiations with bargaining units now, and of course we have the issue about the home sales, which affects the transfer and recordation. So here's our outlook. Next to, okay, I'm going to go to page 16, and now this is, we're now shifting mindset. What we're thinking now is, okay, what are we going to try to do, as opposed to what would happen if we just stayed on autopilot. So in terms of our projection for this coming year, we're looking at we're looking at, when we started, and we expected to spend $56 million of reserves for 24, for the current year, which is something that creates sort of the problem. Right now, we're running slightly worse than that. We're at about we're looking at about, if everything went as projected, we'd be about $17 million worse than that. But that's minor on $4 billion. We will get that. That's basically flat in terms of this. So we are assuming our forecast on the SAC, the Spending Affordability Committee estimates. So this assumes this use of fund balance assumes that we manage to that we get to where we are. It also assumes no use of fund balance in 25. In practice, we may have a little bit for one time, but this is what's here. Now, page 17. Okay, so page 17 is the current, and it will adjust. This is our forecast for our revenues for 25. Again, it will change, but should be pretty close. So if you look at look in the middle of the page where it says approved, on the line that says approved 2024. It's the second column. You see the number. You see a number that says subtotal county sources, 2,562. Okay. Now, if you go over 2 columns to the column that says December 23rd, 2025 forecast, subtotal county sources is 2.5. Yes, it's less. It's $37 million less. Now, the major changes, here are the major changes. Let's go back up, stay in that column, and go up to real property taxes. That's good. That's solid. That number will be very, very close to that. So we're growing at, just under 4%. The personal property taxes are about at 1%, which is basically back to the way the world was before COVID. Income taxes. Income taxes have been very violent. If you look at you see that unaudited 2023 737. The 2022 number that actually came in was 777. So we actually dropped 4. Now here's what I mean by COVID is crazy. In 2021, we had, at the peak of our worst unemployment in modern history of the county because of COVID, we had a 14% increase in our income tax. In 2023, with the lowest unemployment rate in the history of the county, not modern history, we had a 4% decrease. Now, that's crazy. But it's really driven by all of the, all of the federal changes, the tax law changes that are flowing through that had nothing to do with COVID but are catching up with us. But mostly it has to do with those radical shifts in the workforce and jobs and so forth, and all of the money that was pumped in from the federal government. So that's why income tax is returning to normal, but it's returning to normal after dropping. The disparity grant. That's the next thing that I want to point out. You'll see that we have a decline in the disparity grant, a projected decline. We will know in a week or so whether that's right or not. And the reason is, look at 2023, unaudited. $43 million of disparity grant from the state. Then in 24, we got $98 million. Usually the change is 3 or 4%. But Prince George's its income tax became statistically much poorer than it had been in 24, but that won't continue. We are not as bad as that. We're not going to go, some of it is permanent, but most of it, or a very large portion of that change, is related to lottery winnings in some parts of the state. It's related to, one of the counties had one of these one of the little counties did. And it's related to what happened with capital gains in Montgomery and stuff like that. But in any case, we're going to have a lot less money there. Transfer and recordation, we think, is recovering a bit, but it's recovering from a lower level. Then one other that is going down is charges for services. You see that goes down 17 million. The reason that's going down is we receive from the federal government during COVID, if you were a Medicaid patient, the federal government took it up, paid the difference between what we charged everybody else and what Medicaid normally pays, which is only a tiny amount. That ends after this year, and that's the difference. So it's purely, it was a COVID thing that was put in place in order to protect jurisdictions. So and then finally, you see we had $56.7 million of one-time money, and of course, we can't do that every time. And so all of those things collectively make that difference. We have some solutions, but that's what creates the problem. And I just walked through really page 18, so I'm going to go to page 19. The short version of this is MGM, is the gambling revenue is down, not dramatically because it had spiked a lot. It is down slightly. Table games and video lottery games. But, one of the things that's kind of fascinating is, as the pandemic went on, people started gambling immensely. So, anyway, people are still gambling, but not quite as much. It would be interesting, what I don't know is, it would be interesting to see what the sports betting impact of that is, but, I don't have that data. Okay, page 20. So the Spending Affordability Committee is recommending that the numbers that we just saw here. It requires reductions in order to do that, and it says that we should use unassigned fund balance for one-time items. So that zero won't be zero. It'll be probably something like 15. It also recommends that we continue to move our overtime to, at this point we'd be at 4% for our reserve, policy reserve. It'd be 5% and 4%, trying to get us in line with Montgomery and the other big counties so that we're protect our bond rating. And that's reasonable. I don't think that's going to affect us operationally in terms of what we do. Now I'm going to say something summary, and then I'm going to talk about some things that we have in mind. Overall, I want to say that the economic outlook for the country is very good. I think we're actually I do not believe we're going into a recession. Could happen, but so while it's a tough year, it does say that we're normalizing. We've got to deal with the stimulus going away. Revenue is returning to long-term trends, but we've got this 171 we got to deal with. We've got to deal with the blueprint. In the long run, there are two decisions that the state of Maryland made. I'm not saying they're good decisions or bad decisions, but they're big, that constrain us enormously. One is the blueprint, being able to fund that. In fact, one of the things that we discovered recently, and the CAO presented up with the state, is this year the Prince George's County and Baltimore City together paid 110% of the increase in the local commitment to Kerwin. That is to say, on average, across the state, if you take those two out, everybody else paid less slightly, and we paid quite a bit more. So it's a problem. The other issue is stormwater, and we're spending $250 million now. We're probably spending another $250 million, and that is going to put more and more pressure over time on the county. And it's good intent. But it is the numbers that implies for Prince George's and a couple other counties, like I think Anne Arundel, are really pretty big, and they aren't, and it really has to do with the physical layout of the county. So some places are not affected very much, and some places are. Now, so that's where we are. We are in the process of developing our budget. We have a few assumptions I do want to make. First of all, we're building a budget that assumes that, and we believe we're comfortable that we can do some of these things. We're assuming that there will be no layoffs in the county. We don't think that that'll be necessary, any layoffs, any furloughs, or anything like that. We are assuming that we believe that the biggest single piece of that has to do with we have quite a few vacancies. We have over 1,000 vacancies that are funded. So what that really means is that a significant reduction in the number of funded vacancies, which takes you may see a freeze in. We're not going to freeze public safety positions, and we're not going to freeze a couple other critical areas. You may see a temporary freeze, but we won't have to do a permanent freeze. This is an adjustment. We are looking at and how that's going to play out by department. I can't tell you. We're running through all the numbers. We are looking to the state for flexibility in regard to the energy tax and the telecommunications tax. The important one is the energy tax in terms of scale, being able to use it for having flexibility in the use of it, so that we don't have to put our tax on top of the Kerwin requirements. And then the other piece that we're trying to do is to make sure that we're going to have to make some choices as to what areas we're going to particularly on the capital side, what's going to have to be moved out, not necessarily eliminated, but moved out. And that's there's a whole lot more, but we are working our way through, and at this point, there's I could make a whole lot of statements about different departments, but they'd all be wrong, because we're trying to work our way through that. And that's where we're at.